Discover the key insights and strategic approaches that will give you an unfair advantage and ace that exam. The highly anticipated 2025 Zimsec Advanced Level History exam paper is meticulously broken down. Common insights and strategic approaches are offered, providing invaluable guidance for students.
Occupation of Zimbabwe, because it was something in which they've agreed that if someone acquire a certain piece of paper from an influential king of a certain kingdom, it automatically means that he was going to occupy that country. In Africa, it means that they have divided Africa amongst themselves. So by dividing Africa, it means that they have now an effective occupation, and this have made Zimbabwe inevitable. Why? Because when they were dividing countries, this have made Zimbabwe not to be excluded, because it was part and parcel of Africa. So the colonization of Zimbabwe was going to be inevitable, because Africa was partitioned. Whereby he advertised the newspaper that he wanted individuals who were going to help him to have full occupation of Zimbabwe. And automatically, people responded because they got a good piece of paper, that is the Rudd Concession, which proved that Zimbabwe was now under the full influential impetus of the white settlers. And furthermore, we've got the ideology whereby there was now the right to This is one of the complicated questions you can ever meet in your exams. So whenever you are in the exam room and you meet such type of a question, here is how you do it. These questions, they've got the affirmative side and the non-affirmative side on them, but we are the one we are going to decide with regards to the question. Because in this case, the question says, the principle of effective occupation adopted by European powers at the Berlin Conference. So when we are talking about the principle of effective occupation at Berlin Conference, it was the ideology whereby the great powers or European powers, they've gathered together at Berlin in Germany, and they started to discuss how they were going to share or to partition Africa into spheres of influence. And it is being stated that this principle of effective occupation and not the Rudd Concession made the occupation of Zimbabwe inevitable. So in other words, the question, to simplify it, it is saying that the Berlin Conference was the one which made the occupation of Zimbabwe inevitable rather than the Rudd Concession. So it means that on your affirmative side, we are going to address reasons why are you saying that the Berlin Conference have contributed to the occupation of Zimbabwe. However, we are going to explore reasons why you say it is now the Rudd Concession which made the occupation of Zimbabwe inevitable. So in summary, we say good candidates are expected to agree on the fact that good candidates are expected to agree on the fact that good candidates are expected to agree on the fact that the Berlin Conference contributed much. The Berlin Conference contributed much to the occupation of Zimbabwe. However, good candidates can initiate that it was the Rudd Concession. So in this case, on our affirmative side, we are now exploring the impact of the Berlin Conference. How the Berlin, on the non-affirmative side, we are going to explore impact of the Rudd Concession. Right. So, in this case now, here we want to explore how we talk the issue about signing of treaties, partition of Africa, freedom of navigation. What else made here? What Berlin Conference is What else? Chichimwe chakatwa neBerlin Conference. Tinenya respect religion of the native. What else? Navigate boundaries. Chichimwe chakatwa kwainzi chiku Berlin. Ndapi mapoints akataura ndonyaya dzacho idzodzo. Then kuRudd Concession, chii chakaitwa kuRudd Concession? kuRudd Concession yakapa munhu royal charter, makaita kuti pave nepioneer column. Chii chimwe? Right to land, right to minerals. Chii chimwe? Right to colonize. Ndizoka saka tiri ipapo taakuti taking consideration of the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference have caused the effective occupation of Zimbabwe. Are we together? Why are we exploring in that momentum? It is because, according to Otto von Bismarck, at the Berlin Conference, with the consent of other great men, they agreed that if a certain man or a certain country wanted to have an effective occupation of a certain country, they needed to sign treaties so as to prove that a country is now part of their sphere of influence. And this have made treaties such as Moffat Treaty, Lippert Treaty, and Rudd Concession to be signed. And with the result of good impression, we observe that when the Rudd Concession was signed, this have gave Cecil John Rhodes and his team, or Britain itself, to have full occupation of Zimbabwe, because it was something in which they've agreed that if someone acquire a certain piece of paper from an influential king of a certain kingdom, it automatically means that he was going to occupy that country. So tirikuti ine mamwe mashoko erurimi rwamai kusainwa kwaitwa matriti zvakanzi iwewe kana une nyika yakuda kukoloniza unofanira kuenda unomanikidza kana unonyengerera king kuti asaine treaty. Kana king asaina treaty, izvozvo zvatipa rupawo rwekuti zveshuwa nyika yoyo ndiwo chaita se uchanoitoora bhozi wakwanisa kukonvinza munhu. Tauranaka. Furthermore, they were agreed to partition Africa into 25 spheres of influence altogether. So by partitioning Africa, it means that they have divided Africa amongst themselves. So by dividing Africa, it means that they have now an effective occupation, and this have made Zimbabwe inevitable. Why? Because when they were dividing countries, this have made Zimbabwe not to be excluded, because it was part and parcel of Africa. So the colonization of Zimbabwe was going to be inevitable, because Africa was partitioned at the Berlin Conference. Furthermore, there was now going to be freedom of navigation. The fact that there was going to be freedom of navigation, it means that as these countries were now colonizing African countries, they needed to trade, they needed to use the rivers, they needed to use the roads. Are we together? They needed to use the railways. By the fact that all this was part of the plan, it means that Zimbabwe was not going to be excluded, because some of the roads they could pass through Zimbabwe, some of the railways they could pass through Zimbabwe, so as their trade and import and export business to be well initiated. So it was now going to be impossible for Zimbabwe not to be colonized. Furthermore, they need to respect the religion of the natives. The fact is that when the white settlers came in here, they did not ban the worshipping of the ancestors. This have made them to be welcomed and to be loved by both the Shona and the Ndebele, because they thought these people are now doing, they are only doing their business. And zvaisaita kuti vakasike kuonera kuti vanhu havada kutikangasa nokuti vari kutotivhumira kuita life yedu yatagara tichida sei tichikoita. So you think that these people are good for you, and actually it finally led to the colonization. Furthermore, they had to navigate national boundaries. And for instance, by national boundaries, national borders were centered. Zimbabwe was partitioned, Botswana, Mozambique, and whatsoever. So the fact that Africa, individuals, they were now given restrictions of boundaries, it means that automatically colonization was now going to be impossible, because to South Africa was not passport. Mato colonized were already. However, on the other hand, one cannot forget to give the impetus of the Rudd Concession concerning the signing of the treaty. So others that were online, they may seem that why these points are all equal. No, it is because you cannot remember all this. So if you are again implementing 4 points here, 3 points here, 5 points, 2 points here, or whatsoever, your issue will balance. But at the end of the day, we need 10 well-constructed paragraphs. So we can explain the fact that when Sisu, John Rhodes and his team, they've managed to sign the Rudd Concession, it has made them to acquire what we call as the Royal Charter. Whereas the Royal Charter, it was now a document which was giving Sisu, John Rhodes the full district, the full jurisdiction of Zimbabwe, where he was granted mining rights. So if someone is given mining rights, it means that he's automatically controlling the country, because minerals means wealth, and wealth means we are on political power. Furthermore, the Rudd Concession made Sisu John Rhodes to organizer for the Pioneer Column, whereby he advertised the newspaper that he wanted individuals who were going to help him to have full occupation of Zimbabwe. And automatically, people responded because they got a good piece of paper, that is the Rudd Concession, which proved that Zimbabwe was now under the full influential impetus of the white settlers. And furthermore, we've got the ideology whereby there was now the right to minerals. And they were given the right to minerals by the Rudd Concession. Saka kuana minerals matowana fumika. Furthermore, right to colonize Zimbabwe. They were given the ideology that they were going to colonize Zimbabwe under the precedence that they were going to rule Zimbabwe on behalf of Britain. So if it was not the Rudd Concession to colonize Zimbabwe, it was going to be inevitable. But just because the Rudd Concession, it was now inevitable. This is what you write on this side. And the affirmative side we have explained. So, ndo maitrat aita menoka na mwine mumvunzo. Motsana ngura tobatsirana. Ndo nawo yacho. Vunza. Alright, zvekuzofarisa zviri kwamira nzime kamera. Izvi zvavana vemudanga.